Hello, my name is Paul Gilbert. I'm a clinical psychologist, and we've been developing a series of talks to help us think about how we can use compassion in these times of stress and difficulty. So we've been looking at our emotions and our motives and how we can use the body to support the mind. And today we're going to look at how we can use the mind to support the body. And then we'll have a series of talks on that basic theme. So in order for me to do that, I'm going to do what I always do, which is to share my screen with you. So here we go then. We go down here. There we go. Go to share. There we go. We go to that little square there. There we go. Okay, so this really is in the same theme of using our understanding of compassion will help us when we can link how the mind and the body are connected. So a couple of things first then, just to remind us that we have these basic built-in algorithms. Nature's built in these pathways, so when this stimulus arises, the body responds in this way. So we've done that, and the algorithm we've been interested in is, of course, the caring algorithm. When there's distress, the body becomes aroused and then use a desire to do something about it. When we were talking about our emotions, just to remind you very quickly, we talked about 3 emotion systems because they have different functions, the types of functions, what they're designed to do. And one set of emotions is designed to protect you. They're the threat system emotions. Now, they're also, unfortunately, the emotions that will give you a lot of stress. They're not designed just to be a pain. They're designed originally to protect you, but the way they work in the modern brain, they can cause a lot of stress because these are the emotions of anxiety and frustration and anger and so forth. Then there are a series of emotions which are related to more activation, to go out and do things and look for things and achieve things. Those are the drive type emotions. And then we saw the emotions for calming, resting, digesting, where the body is able to get more balance in terms of this activation. If the body stays in activated states, it will just eventually get exhausted. And so it needs to have time when it can rest. And also that means degrees of peacefulness and contentedness and settledness and so forth. And we can see then that compassion, that motivation for compassion, can relate to all of these 3 different types of emotion. For example, when we are engaged in compassion, we can be stressed, can't we? Like many of our rescue services and many of our health worker services, it's very, very stressful what they're doing at the moment, but they're doing it in the service of compassion. It can also be a lot of drive around. And we can have joy, can't we, from helping others, being able to go out and help others and do things and volunteer and feel that we're making a contribution. That can give us a sense of joy and pleasure. So we're driven, we want to do that, don't we? And then thirdly, there's the importance of understanding that compassion is also linked to the ability to have a parasympathetic response, to be able to feel settled and soothed in the body, not just rushing around do all the time. And when we have a settled mind, it gives us an opportunity to be able to work with some of the things that are very stressful. I should mention also, of course, talked before, that grief is a very important emotion as well in these times, and the ability to compassionately work with our grief is very important. Now, the other thing is that we've talked a little bit about the autonomic nervous system and how that is related to the activation and the slowing, the settling systems. And the idea really is what we need to do when we're in very stressful situations is, as best as we can, try to maintain some kind of balance. Now, this can be extremely tricky, obviously, if you're rushing around or trying to do things and working in the various services and so forth, or if you're very anxious about the virus or whatever it is. But the key thing is using some of the techniques we've been looking at to help you. They're not magic, but they can help you. Learning to ground in the body, learning to spend a little bit of time, learning to slow down so that you can focus. And now I'm going to be talking a little bit about how we can focus our minds to help our bodies. Now, one way in which psychologists think about this is also in terms of what we call algorithms. And here we use a little bit of a technical language, and we use what we call the unconditioned stimulus. Now, what an unconditioned stimulus means that it's already part of an algorithm, okay? And the unconditioned response. Okay, now just stay with me, because if you stay with me, you'll get the hang of how the body can react in a stressful way because of what's been happening to the body. In other words, the body remembers, how the body learns. And if we understand how the body is reacting to certain kinds of stresses, it gives us an opportunity then to change direction of that, to use our minds to settle our bodies. So here we go then. Imagine that you see food, or an animal sees food. What that does is it stimulates salivation, and they're prepared to eat. They focus their attention on the food, and then they start to salivate and so forth. In other words, the animal doesn't learn to salivate. It already has a system for salivation. It just needs to be triggered. If, on the other hand, there is a sexual opportunity, then that will stimulate a different area in the brain. In humans, it's in the pituitary, and that will produce a cascade of emotions which give a level of arousal. So it's good not to get these two things mixed up. I mean, I know sometimes women say they prefer chocolate, but there we are, and sometimes men too. But generally speaking, these are already wired in pathways. Then, of course, if there are threats from others, like we're being bullied or whatever it is, this will stimulate our threat system, won't it? And then we will feel anxious or angry or even get depressed. Now, once again, that's not your fault at all. That's wired into you. Now, for sure, many psychologists will say, yes, but of course, the way you interpret information is important, and the culture and how you express an emotion, all that is absolutely very, very important. But we want to start off with the simple facts first, that there are systems in your brain that are designed to respond when certain cues, certain triggers, certain stimuli are around. What's important is that over many millions of years, we have brains and bodies that will respond to signals of friendship, kindness, helpfulness, cooperation, care, love. All of those things are very, very important when they are in the environment. The parasympathetic system in particular says, okay, things are safe now. I don't have to be on, I don't need my threat system on. I can turn my threat system off because, look, I'm in this environment where people are caring and understanding and helpful. Now, of course, it doesn't mean it turns it completely off, because like if you're ill, or you're still going to be anxious about various stuff, but you can see that these signals are extremely important for stimulating parts of our brain in the frontal cortex, down-regulating the amygdala, and helping the parasympathetic system. Now, it's about balance, because as I say, it doesn't take it all away, nothing like that, but it's about balance. So what we can see then is that we've got these basic systems which are wired in. That's what they are. They're part of the algorithm. Okay, we've talked about that before. But here's the key thing that we want to get across today, and that is there's also what we call a conditioned stimulus. Now, a conditioned stimulus is a stimulus which, because of association, can stimulate those basic brain pathways. It's quite extraordinary, actually. And Ivo Pavlov won a Nobel Prize in 1904 for this, actually. And what he did, and you might have heard of this, is he sounded a bell just before he provided food for animals, dogs. It was dogs. Provided food for dogs. He didn't use cats, because you know what cats are like. They say, "Oh, I've eaten before. You know, I've eaten next door. That's I'm not interested in the food." So he used dogs. So dogs were given, the bell would sound, then the food, and after a series of pairings, what happened was the bell started to stimulate exactly the same pathways as the food. Now remember, there's nothing in nature that like a bell. So it's through association that the brain says, okay, so this bell now means food is coming, I will prepare for food. And of course, it's the same with sexuality, actually, that individuals can acquire an association, like a fetish, for example, where that fetish, whatever it is, rubber or chocolate cakes or whatever it is, can stimulate the same pathways of the arousal system. Okay, so that's important. What about a telephone? Now, supposing, for example, you have a very bad relationship with your mother or whatever, or you're an emergency worker and you're on tenterhooks and you're waiting for the phone to go. When the phone goes, okay, it's nothing harmful about the phone, but that might actually stimulate anger if you're kind of needing to rest, or might make you kind of anxious, or if it's you're anticipating having an argument with your mother, then you might feel depressed, right? So the key to get across here really is that different stimuli can start activating these pathways which are biologically designed different things, okay? And it's the same thing with our physiology systems. Many children, for example, they will have something like a teddy bear, which can act as a soothing, comforting toy, and they might take it to bed with them if they're anxious. You know, when my son was was young, 4 or 5 years old, he actually had a teddy bear that he called Woody, and this teddy bear would go to school with him. And I think he was younger than that; it was a nursery, and it would give him a sense of comfort. It's called a transitional object. Now, why is all this important? All this is important because this is what happens. This is how the body learns. And one of the important things is learning how we can stimulate our compassion systems by using cues around us that will stimulate that system. So let's have a look at this now. So here's the system again, right? Here's a meal. There's the erotic example. And we can actually now stimulate these systems indirectly through imagination. So if you, for example, are very hungry and you simply imagine a wonderful meal, oh dear, you know, if you're a meat eater, it might be steak and chips. If you're a vegetarian, it might be a stuffed pepper. Oh, time for a stuffed pepper. That will stimulate these biological pathways. Now, keep in mind then that you can turn on these biological pathways by what you imagine. And this is absolutely going to be absolutely crucial when we come to some compassion. And of course, we use the sexual example simply because it's such an easy example. People are very familiar just how powerful imagery is in terms of stimulating particular systems in your brain. I mean, it's quite extraordinary if you think about it. What you imagine, what you hold in your mind can stimulate a small set of cells in your pituitary to produce this amazing set of changes in your body, okay? I once had one of my clients who said, oh, I much prefer imagery, Paul. He said, because you meet a better class of person. There we are. So the key there, the key we want to get across is that imagery can be extremely powerful, because if you don't really get that point, then people don't really understand, well, why do I need to practice imagery? It's just images in the mind. Well, no, it's not. And I hope I've really hammered this enough to help you see that it really isn't. Now, what about if somebody's bullying you? Well, if you're focusing on being bullied, if you're anticipating being bullied, if you're going over and over in your mind about being bullied, or, as we'll see in another talk, if you kind of do it to yourself, if you're one of these individuals who are very self-critical and you're very good at putting yourself down, there's only one system you're going to whack into, isn't there? Which is your threat system. So the point is that if you keep focusing on these threats, you will be activating your threat system. Okay, now if you are in a situation where you're being bullied, then maybe the thing to do is to think about how you might be able to get out of that situation. But the point that I'm trying to make is that how we think and how we focus, what we imagine and what we keep in mind will have an impact on our physiology. And that's why it's so important that if we learn how to orientate our minds towards kindness, towards compassion, towards courage, towards all those things, which are very important for the parasympathetic system, this is going to help us to soothe and ground and balance. Okay? So basically what I've tried to provide for you today is this insight into how powerful our minds are and how useful developing images can be. Okay. Because we're going to be developing some images in a minute. Now, another way you can think about this is like this. Look, supposing that you like to have cheesecakes, you like cheesecakes, or maybe beer, or maybe prawns, or whatever it is. And then one day you have a cheesecake or prawns or drink some beer, and it makes you very, very ill. You become very sick, very nauseous, you vomit a lot and all that. And then you recover, okay? And then a friend invites you over for lunch. And as you're just about to sit down for lunch, they say, oh, I remember you like prawns, or I remember you like beer, or I remember you like cheesecake, and they stick a cheesecake under your nose. What happens in your body? Well, there will be an immediate reaction. Oh God, not a cheesecake. Oh no, just the smell of it. Oh God. Why? Because your body has remembered. Your body remembers. Remember this process I showed you just now. So your body will put you into the same physiological state that you were in, that the cheesecake called. It doesn't make you anxious, it doesn't make you angry, it makes you nauseous, because that was your defensive response when you had a cheesecake that was bad, or prawns that were bad. And this happens with all kinds of stimuli. Stimuli can put you into anxious states because of what they're associated with, right? That you can hear a sound that can put you into an anxious state. You can, if you've had a lot of trauma in a particular place, like in a hospital or something like that, just the sound of the hospital or some smells could trigger it again, right? Now, the key thing to remember, right, is that's absolutely not your fault. It is the way the body works. There's nothing gone wrong. It can be extremely unpleasant, there's no doubt about that, but let's make sure we understand the system, and then we'll be able to deal with it. Because if, when we have that, we learn to retrain the body by doing the breathing, doing the focusing, doing the compassion over time, this will help us. So the body will respond very quickly, because that's what it's designed to do, because you're triggering those algorithms, those patterns in the brain. So we can use our brains, okay, to notice these experiences, but also to stimulate different processes, such as when we do our breathing and we deliberately focus on different processes that allow us to settle and bring some balance to that threat system, because that's what we're trying to do when we get very stressed, is to bring some balance to the threat system as best we can. So we can also use our minds to work out how to satisfy our desires or regulate our emotions, and this is extremely helpful, okay? But again, we have to do it compassionately, because some people satisfy their desires at the expense of others. You know, some people satisfy their desires quite harmfully, to do things that are quite harmful to others. So again, it's important that we use our minds. We use our minds to help our bodies. We use our minds to pursue our motives, but not if they're going to be unhelpful. So now then, we've seen how stimuli work. What kind of images can we use in order to help our parasympathetic system, to help balancing the autonomic system, to help get certain sections of our brain going? And here there's a couple that I want to share with you. Now, one is called Safe Place. And what we do in Safe Place is we engage in our soothing rhythm breathing. Excuse me, remember that's the breathing when you're deepening the breath down into the diaphragm, 5-second breaths, or maybe you've chosen to do 5 and 7, you know, 5 in and 7 seconds out, or whatever it is you've chosen, provided you keep to the same pattern, that's okay. So then we're grounding in the body, allowing the body to settle. We have the friendly facial expression. We focus on the feeling of the body slowing down, mind slowing down, becoming heavier in the chair as we just engage in the breathing. Okay. Now, when you've done that, then you bring to mind and you create in your mind a place where you would feel safe. Okay. A place where you'd feel safe. A place maybe you've been before and you got a lot of happy memories there, or it might be a totally new place. And you practice bringing this place to mind and focusing on the sensation of mind slowing down, of feeling safe in this place. Now, sometimes what can happen is people can have fleeting images, and then if they're very stressed, they have a fleeting image, and then their mind will go back to the thing they're worried about. If that happens, don't worry about it. Just see that's the way it is. And just try if you can, just to keep bringing yourself back to a safe place, back to a safe place. Sometimes people like to may have music that might be associated with a safe place, or a smell that might be associated with a safe place. We'll have a look at that in a moment. And you can choose any way you like. Now, the only thing I would say to you is sometimes people choose a safe place, like in their home or in bed or something like that. Just make sure that it is what we call a safe place and not a place of safety. Now, a place of safety can be very important, but that's really a place where we're trying to stop bad things happening. you know, we're kind of locking ourselves away. We're not letting the world get to us. We can just close the doors on us, and that's okay, right? But a place of safety is where we're preventing the bad, whereas a place of safeness is where we're opening. It's the rest and digest system. A place of safety, we close the doors and we just want to hide away. That's the threat system, trying to settle the threat system. Place of safeness is where we feel open, safe, okay, free. We can move around. We don't have to have a worry. So just be clear then that when we do a safe place, we're focusing on this freedom. The next thing you might want to do is, if you feel safe in this place, what would you like to do? Because when you feel safe, you might also want to have a little bit of drive, right? And it was working with some of my clients many years ago who said, well, if I feel safe, I wouldn't want to just sit around, you know, not doing anything. I'd like to do something. And they said, well, we said, well, what would you like to do? One person wanted to ride a motorbike very fast. Another person wanted to fly. I'd like to be able to fly in my place. Okay, do anything you want. If it gives you joy, if it feels safe, do anything you want, okay? And the only stipulation for all of this is never do things that are likely to be harmful, only what's helpful. So never imagine doing things that are harmful to other people or harmful to yourself. Now you could say, oh, flying could be harmful, but of course this is an imagination, so you're all right doing that. So always be playful, but doing things in a way that's helpful. Okay, so clear then, safety is about stopping bad things happening, place of safeness. Now, practicing safe place, again, it can take a little bit of time, and but it can give us a grounding and a settling. We bring to mind a place where we feel safe, and bring to mind a place where we might want to just, you know, walk in the country or walk in a mountain, or, you know, be on the ski slope, or whatever it is for you. Finding your place where your mind can give you a sense of safeness and resting. Okay, and if you want to be playful in it as well, that's okay, because that's balancing. The next thing that's quite useful when you're doing this safe place is to imagine your relationship to the place itself. Okay, so this is a place that's your place, right? You can have people there, or you don't have to have people there. It's up to you. If you want to have your friends there or people you love there, that's up to you. If you want to be alone for a while, that's up to you. It's completely up to you how you want to experience this place. One of the things that can be really quite helpful is if you begin to imagine that because this is your place and it's there for you, it's being built for you, it's in your mind, it's for you, is to imagine this place welcoming you. So this place takes joy in you being there. Okay, this place is for you. It takes joy in you being there. It takes joy in you enjoying being there. Okay, so if there are trees or there's the sea or whatever it is, imagine that this is you. You know, there is a connection between you and this place. You are connected because this is your place, right? This is your place that you have created in your mind as a place for rest, digest, recuperation. Okay, so again, that's quite a useful practice. So we don't have the time to go into these practices in detail. What I've done is to try to explain how you can do them by, remember, doing the body practices first, getting the breathing, slowing the body, and then using your mind to guide you through these practices, and see how you go. And you can have as many places as you want. And sometimes places are quite strange, you know, because I remember one of my meditations, my safe place was standing on a beach watching a thunderstorm come in and just beginning to feel the wind on my face and watching this dark purple cloud of lightning. And I found that extremely grounding and gave me a sense of safeness, surprisingly, it's quite surprising, but also a little bit of an invigoration and joy. Okay. The next imagery and the last imagery for this talk, and now remember, we've talked how and why imagery is important because you're stimulating those pathways in your brain, okay, is we're going to imagine a compassionate other. Okay, so I'm just going to show you this. Okay, basically this is what we're going to do. We're going to imagine a compassionate other. Now, of course, you know, if you have other people around you who are very caring and loving to you and care and so on, this is great because this will stimulate your soothing system, as we've seen. That's very, very important. But also, you know, we can just imagine it. Okay. Now, this isn't a replacement of real relationships, not in any way at all, any more than a sexual fantasy should be a replacement of a real relationship. But the idea of creating a compassionate image and a compassionate image that you interact with is because you're wanting to stimulate your mind. You're stimulating particular brain pathways. That's why you're doing this. Now, it's a little bit like taking exercise. You know, some people say, oh, yeah, but it's not real, is it? No, that's true. It's not real. But then on the other hand, if you got onto an exercise bike and you cycle for 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes, and you got off and you said, oh, this is bizarre. I've been cycling for 20 minutes and I'm still in the same place. What a waste of time. The point that you do the exercise is because you're practicing developing your muscles and your fitness. It's not to take you anywhere. And this is the same thing with compassionate imagery. It's not to take you anywhere. It's to stimulate certain systems in your body and in your brain, because that will be helpful to you. And also because we are an interconnected species. So what do you do? Well, what you do, you can do this in your same place, whatever, you just create an image of the most compassionate person for you that you could imagine, okay? This is quite useful because what it means is that you have to imagine what a compassionate person would be like, okay? Would they be a male or a female? Would they be older than you? What would they be like? Would they be human? They may not be, you know, they might be an animal, or like Aslan in the Narnia stories. Any kind of mind that has a compassionate motivation and orientation to you, and you can experience that, acts as a compassionate other. Okay. All right. So then, so imagining that, just like if you was to imagine your ideal compassionate lover, what would they be like? Blah, 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 blah. This is your ideal compassionate other. So you think of the qualities this person will have, or this mind will have, if it's an animal or something. There'll be understanding, they'll have wisdom, they understand the nature that life is tricky, right? We all find ourselves here, nobody chose to be here. Your compassionate other will understand that there's lots of stuff going on in our heads that makes it very difficult for us sometimes, that we can be in great distress, or we can, you know, lose our tempers or whatever it is. They're never, ever judgmental to you, okay? The compassionate other will always try to support you and help you. Okay, so just imagining that, having this relationship with this compassionate other. And sometimes you can imagine conversing with them, or them just being with you, and you're creating an image to stimulate pathways in your brain, no different in principle than if you was to have a sexual fantasy. It's all the same. There's no rocket science here. This is just using images to help support your brain and support your body, so that you can begin to downregulate your stress system, to bring balance to your mind. Now, of course, there are many other aspects to imagining a compassionate other and practicing imagining a compassionate other. So, for example, if you're angry, then your compassionate other may be understanding your anger. Yeah, I understand how you're angry. Yeah, that makes, okay. But they'll always try to also help you to behave helpfully, not harmfully, okay? Because sometimes if we're very angry, the last thing we want is somebody to try and calm us down. You need somebody who understands us, don't you, really? So always ensure then that your compassionate other will support you in the way that you need, and practicing thinking about what do I need in itself can be very useful, but always, it's always to be helpful, not hurtful or harmful. In the end, that's a key element of our behavior, okay? So let's go back then just to remind ourselves for this talk about how we can use our mind to support our body and our brain. We can begin to use the basic algorithms of the mind. The algorithms of the mind are linked to unconditioned stimuli and unconditioned responses, as we saw, basic algorithms of the mind, okay? And then they can get linked up through associative learning, okay, like the bell or a fetish or whatever it is. But also, we can stimulate those pathways ourselves by what we think, by what we imagine, the pictures in the mind, what we focus on, right? And sometimes we get caught up in ways of thinking and so forth, which are quite stressful. So we can choose on purpose to refocus on bringing balance to the autonomic system so that we can ground ourselves, get more of a parasympathetic tone, more vagal tone. And we can do that through using the body, but also using the mind. And there are two exercises I've given you today. One is safe place and grounding, which can be really helpful. And the other is imagining a compassionate other. Now, you can have more than one compassionate other. You can have as many as you want, really. And you can also imagine a compassionate community, okay? So, for example, in some of the practices I do, we would imagine being part of a compassionate community. There are many people around who are there to help us. So, for example, with this virus, you see, I could imagine if I got this virus and I was ill, I imagine all of the doctors and nurses working as hard as they possibly can to save me. They're all dedicated. They're going to do everything they can to help me. And when I focus on that, you see, that's such an important way of feeling, isn't it? Such an important way of feeling. Whereas if I just focus on fear, 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 then I'm going to stay in the threat system. But if I focus on, just imagine all those doctors and nurses around doing everything they can to help you, to heal you, to support you. Isn't that wonderful? So it kind of almost wants to make you cry, doesn't it, really? So that's the key to this whole thing, right? Using our mind wisely, using our mind to balance when the threat system is flaring up, okay, and choosing how we want to focus the mind. So I hope this has been helpful. Talk for you with a few practices that you can go and try, and do practice them because they take a little bit of time, and spend as much time as you want with each of them. What you might also have noticed from what we've been talking about with compassion imagery and imagining how wonderful the medical staff would be if you needed them is this issue of what we call gratitude. And that sometimes it's very useful for us to focus on the things that we are grateful for and the people that we are grateful for. And you can build that into your compassionate other imagery, just bringing to mind times when people have been very helpful to you. One little bit of warning, it's not really a warning, well, it's got sort of a warning really, is that if you create a compassion image, be careful that it has the appropriate feelings for you, because for example, sometimes when we work with our clients, they imagine a grandmother who was very wonderful, but then they start grieving and feeling very sad that the grandmother's not here anymore. So you can see that that wouldn't be so helpful in the long run. Another aspect that could be really quite useful is that when you're doing these imagery exercises on a safe place or on a compassionate other, is to maybe hold a stone, semi-precious stone in your hand, which then can act as a trigger. Or Deborah Lee suggests that you can have a smell like hand cream or something, some smell that's very important for you. So that when you are stressed and you're wanting to bring these circuits online, imagining your compassionate other being helpful to you, you can also smell, maybe have it on a handkerchief or wherever. And that smell, the smell is a very powerful trigger of some of these systems. So those are a couple of key things to keep in mind. Ensure that the images that you choose don't come with sort of other emotions that might not be helpful to you. And imagining also individuals who have been helpful to you, the concept of gratitude, we know that's very important. And finally, that you can use sensory cues and turn them into a conditioned stimulus so that when you smell or when you hold or when you touch, it just triggers you into your images and into those physiological states. So I hope this has been of use to you. We've gone through safe place, compassionate other, and in our next talk, we're going to be looking at how we can use our mind to help the brain and the body in different ways linked to thinking.